Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel once again. In today's video I want to talk you about the different kinds of tests you can add to your Rails application and also a strategy you could follow in the case you see yourself in the situation of inheriting an application that almost has no tests and you are on a budget. Let's start. In the Ruby community there is the convention of adding tests to all the new code you are shipping. But unfortunately, this is not the same in other languages. At least in my experience working with Java, that wasn't the case. And also, when I've done technical due diligence of startups, I've seen that startups using other languages than Ruby on Rails didn't have this concept of adding tests to cover all the code that they were writing. And even in Rails, I've worked in some code bases that didn't have enough tests to do changes with confidence. So speaking of the amount of tests you should be adding to your code, which should be enough? In my opinion, enough means writing the amount of tests that give you the confidence that the code is working as you expect it to do. And also when you're fixing a bug, you should be writing enough regression tests to ensure that the bug doesn't come back again. So is the amount of tests we write all that we have to take into account? In my opinion, it's not. And that is because there are several kinds of tests. And by several kinds of tests, I don't mean the different kind of things you could test in a Rails application, like for example, models, mailers, helpers, or whatever. I mean unit, requests, and integration tests. And having said that, you should choose wisely which kind of tests you will add to your application, especially if you are on a tight budget. And without further ado, let's see those three types in detail and also their goal and coverage. Okay, the first one, unit tests. Unit tests are meant to test things in isolation. That is, their goal is to test methods in isolation. For example, you will find it in your Rails code base whenever you want to test individual methods in your models, in your mailers, in your helpers, and that kind of things. So you typically will see yourself writing unit tests that test the methods thoroughly in a way, for example, that they check all possible corner cases that they have. And as you can imagine, the coverage of this kind of test is limited solely to the method that they are testing. Okay, now comes the second type of tests, and it's request tests. The goal of request tests is to exercise all the endpoints of your application, checking that the output they produce makes sense with the input that they are given. As you can imagine, the coverage of request tests is wider than the one we had with unit tests, as in this case we are not testing a single method in isolation, but an endpoint in a controller. But we are not testing the interaction with other third-party systems, which is something that we will do with integration tests. And now that, as you can imagine, it comes the third one, as we mentioned, integration tests. In this kind of tests is the one that has the widest coverage, because their goal is to check the application as a whole as the end user would do. And that implies, of course, also testing third-party systems, mailing, and so on. Okay, now that you know the three big categories of tests that you could add to your application, which kind of tests should you add if you are in a budget and you don't have tests in your applications? Ideally, I will tell you that you should be adding all the tests possible you can. But unfortunately, and it has happened to me, I've started working in some application that didn't have enough tests. So if you see yourself in this situation, I would advise you to follow the following steps. The first one, in my opinion, would be to write enough integration tests so that they cover the application's main use case from the business perspective. Like for example, if you have an application that generates reports and that's the most important feature for your user, you should write an integration test for that. Once you have integration tests that cover the most important use cases for your business, then you will be in a position in which you will be able to make changes to your application and have some level of confidence that you are not going to break things, or at least you are not going to go out of business, which is a lot. And then once you are here, I would recommend you to start writing unit and request tests that check things that are not easy to test with integration tests, because at this point you have a little bit more room. And of course, while you are doing all these things, I will recommend you to also include code that tests all the new functionality that you're adding during this process, and also add enough regression tests for the bugs you are fixing so that they don't come back in the future. And that was it for today's video. If you have any question or want me to talk about any topic in particular, please write me a comment in the comment section down below. And if you don't want to miss any of my further updates, please subscribe to my channel. And if you liked the video, please smash the like button so I can make more videos like this. And without further ado, I hope to see you in my next video. Adios.